How does a man go from being one of the most popular stars in Hollywood to being forgotten by everyone, even his own best friend? James Franco was everywhere from the 2000s and early 2010s, and becoming a household name through his roles in Spider-Man and in critically acclaimed films like 127 Hours, which earned him an Academy Award nomination. Alongside Seth Rogen, he starred in Pineapple Express, one of the defining comedies of the late 2000s that grossed over $100 million worldwide, a film that cemented their status as one of the most dynamic duos in Hollywood. But behind the scenes, something much darker was growing. James Franco's charm and ambition made him a star, but it also blinded people to the signs that something wasn't right. As his fame grew, so did the whispers about his behavior. What started as small concerns among insiders eventually exploded into public scandals that would tear apart everything he and Rogen built together. Allegations of inappropriate behavior, abuse of power, and sexual misconduct surfaced, shattering Franco's public image, but also strained nearly every personal and professional relationship he had built, including his friendship with Seth Rogen. The two created a chemistry that was undeniable, but as the accusations piled up, Rogen faced a crossroads: remain loyal to his friend or acknowledge a painful truth he could no longer ignore. Throughout the early part of his career, Franco was seen as one of the most talented and versatile actors of his generation. He was in major franchises, quirky indie films, biopics, and even directed his own projects. He earned praise for his roles in Milk, where he portrayed Harvey Milk's lover, and in Rise of the Planet of the Apes, where he added emotional depth to a blockbuster sci-fi film. In Spring Breakers, he took one of the biggest creative risks of his career, transforming into the bizarre and unsettling character Alien. Shocking audiences and critics alike, it seemed like there was nothing he couldn't do. Franco and Rogen worked together repeatedly, creating hits like This Is the End, where they played exaggerated versions of themselves, and The Interview, a film that created massive international controversy by depicting the assassination of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The Interview made global headlines, leading to cyber attacks on Sony Pictures and threats of violence against theaters. Despite the chaos, Franco and Rogen's bond seemed only to strengthen, a testament to their deep personal loyalty. Their creative partnership reached its peak with The Disaster Artist in 2017. The film, which chronicled the making of the infamously terrible cult classic The Room, showcased Franco at his best. He directed and starred in the film, with Rogen serving as producer and supporting actor. Franco's portrayal of eccentric filmmaker Tommy Wiseau earned him universal acclaim, a Golden Globe win, and serious Oscar buzz. Standing on the Golden Globe stage in January 2018, Franco was at the absolute pinnacle of his career, critically respected, commercially viable, and with his best friend by his side. No one could have predicted that within days, the foundations of this friendship would begin to crumble. The first significant crack appeared in 2010, when news broke that Franco had attempted to arrange a hotel meeting with a 17-year-old girl through Instagram. When the girl revealed their exchange online, Franco admitted to the interaction but claimed he didn't know her age. At the time, the incident was largely treated as a momentary lapse in judgment rather than evidence of a larger pattern of behavior. Rogen stood by his friend, even making light of the situation during media appearances. Industry insiders now point to this moment as the first major test of their friendship, one that Franco passed largely unscathed thanks to Rogen's unwavering support. What neither the public nor possibly Rogen himself knew was that behind the scenes, Franco's behavior allegedly followed a troubling pattern. According to later legal filings between 2014 and 2017, Franco was running an acting school called Studio 4 that would become the epicenter of serious allegations against him. Former students would later claim that Franco used the school to find young actresses and place them in uncomfortable and exploitative situations. Acting exercises allegedly devolved into simulated sex scenes where protective barriers were removed. Students reported feeling pressured to perform increasingly explicit scenes with the implied promise of roles in Franco's projects. The dam broke in January 2018, just days after Franco's Golden Globe triumph. As the hashtag Me Too movement gained momentum throughout Hollywood, 5 women came forward with allegations of sexual misconduct against Franco. The Los Angeles Times published detailed accounts from former students describing what they characterized as abuse of power and inappropriate behavior. The timing couldn't have been more dramatic. Franco went from wearing a Time's Up pin on stage at the Golden Globes to being the subject of serious allegations within a matter of days. For Rogen, this crisis presented an unprecedented dilemma. His response would define not just his relationship with Franco, but potentially his own standing in an industry undergoing a seismic cultural shift. Unlike the 2014 Instagram incident, these allegations couldn't be dismissed as a misunderstanding. They suggested a pattern of behavior that directly contradicted the values Rogen had publicly championed throughout his career. Franco's immediate response only complicated matters. While denying the specific allegations, he made several media appearances where his answers seemed evasive and inconsistent. During a late-night television appearance, Franco stated, "If I've done something wrong, I will fix it. I have to." This ambiguous phrasing left even his supporters confused about what exactly he was admitting to. The most revealing aspect of this critical juncture wasn't what was said, but what wasn't. For nearly 3 years following the allegations, Rogen maintained almost complete public silence regarding Franco. Their once inseparable public personas suddenly existed in separate universes. Projects they had developed together quietly disappeared from production schedules. The Pineapple Express sequel, which had been in development, was never mentioned again. Their creative partnership, which had produced some of the most successful comedies of the era, came to an abrupt halt without any formal announcement. Industry analysts note this extended silence represented a dramatic departure from Hollywood's traditional crisis management playbook. Typically, when a star faces serious allegations, their closest colleagues issue carefully worded statements of support that avoid addressing the specific claims. Rogen's refusal to follow this protocol signaled the serious nature of the situation and his own internal struggle with how to respond. Behind closed doors, reports suggest Rogen was devastated. Sources close to both men describe Rogen as blindsided by the allegations. The friend he thought he knew, the creative partner who had been instrumental in his biggest successes, was suddenly revealed as someone potentially very different. This revelation forced Rogen to reconsider not just their future collaborations, but their entire shared history. The final nail in the coffin came in 2021. After years of speculation about the status of their relationship, Rogen finally addressed the situation directly in a series of media interviews. When asked if he would work with Franco again, Rogen stated plainly, "I don't plan to right now." More significantly, when questioned about his previous support for Franco, Rogen expressed regret, saying the situation has changed many things in our relationship and our dynamic. These statements represented more than just a professional separation. They signaled the death of a friendship that had defined both men's careers for nearly 2 decades. For industry observers, Rogen's willingness to publicly distance himself from Franco, the severity of the allegations, and the profound personal impact they had on their relationship. The timing of Rogen's 2021 statements coincided with the settlement of a class action lawsuit against Franco. Former students of Studio 4 had filed suit alleging sexual exploitation and fraud. Franco agreed to pay $2.2 million to settle the claims without admitting liability. This legal resolution provided Rogen with the clarity he may have been waiting for before making his position public. The dissolution of the Franco-Rogen partnership illustrates several crucial dynamics specific to Hollywood friendships. Unlike typical personal relationships, their bond existed simultaneously as a friendship, a business partnership, and a public brand. When allegations against Franco emerged, Rogen faced pressure in all 3 dimensions: personally betrayed by behavior he apparently hadn't known about, professionally endangered by continued association, and publicly questioned about his response. The financial implications were substantial. Their collaborative projects had generated hundreds of millions in revenue. Franco and Rogen weren't just friends, they were the center of an economic ecosystem that employed hundreds of people and represented significant investments for studios. The cancellation of their planned projects rippled throughout the industry, affecting everyone from writers to crew members who had relied on their consistent output. For Franco, the consequences were devastating and immediate. He was removed from marketing campaigns for films already completed. His Oscar campaign for The Disaster Artist imploded overnight. Major studios ceased development on his projects. His career momentum, which had been building steadily for 2 decades, came to an abrupt halt. What makes Franco's case particularly notable is that, unlike other figures implicated in the Catch Me Too movement who faced immediate public denunciations, Franco's downfall was characterized more by silence, the gradual disappearance of opportunities rather than a dramatic public cancellation. Perhaps most painfully for Franco, the loss of Rogen's support represented more than just another professional setback. It was the loss of his most consistent ally in Hollywood, someone who had been beside him from Freaks and Geeks through global stardom. Industry psychologists note that in an environment as volatile as Hollywood, Long-term friendships often serve as crucial anchors of stability and identity. Losing such a friendship can be profoundly disorienting, especially when coupled with career collapse. For Rogen, the situation presented an impossible choice between personal loyalty and ethical principles. His eventual decision to distance himself from Franco suggests the allegations were serious enough to override nearly 2 decades of friendship. Cultural critics have noted that Rogen's response represents a broader societal shift in how men respond to allegations against their friends. Rather than unconditional support regardless of behavior, there's growing recognition of the responsibility to hold even close friends accountable. In the aftermath, both men have approached their shared history differently. Rogen has largely avoided discussing Franco or their collaborative work when reflecting on his career accomplishments.
20 great years together, but I guess it's over. And not for a lack of trying. I've told him how much he's meant to me. Now, in a new interview with Esquire, Seth was asked how it felt to have something so personal become so public. He responded by saying, "I absorbed so little media that it really wasn't on my radar." But that is all the star would say on the topic.
In interviews promoting subsequent projects, questions about Franco are typically met with brief, carefully worded responses that avoid reigniting controversy. This selective amnesia regarding their partnership speaks volumes about how thoroughly the allegations have tainted their creative legacy. For audiences, the Franco-Rogen split creates a complicated relationship with their body of work. Films that once represented carefree escapism now carry the weight of serious allegations. The genuine chemistry that made their performances compelling is now viewed through a different lens. This transformation illustrates how cultural context inevitably reshapes artistic legacy. Their films remain unchanged, but our experience of them is forever altered. 3 years after their public split, the prospects for reconciliation appear remote. Unlike typical Hollywood feuds that end in carefully orchestrated reunions, the Franco-Rogen dissolution involved fundamental ethical questions that resist easy resolution. Industry experts note that while Hollywood loves a comeback story, some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. The legacy of the Franco-Rogen partnership ultimately reveals how even Hollywood's strongest creative relationships remain vulnerable to the consequences of personal behavior. Their rise together demonstrated how perfectly matched creative chemistry can elevate both participants beyond their individual potential. Their fall shows how quickly such partnerships can unravel when trust is broken and public accountability demands response. Their story serves as both a cultural time capsule and a cautionary tale. A capsule of an era when a certain brand of romantic comedy dominated American cinema, and a warning that even the most successful creative partnerships cannot survive when built on foundations that ultimately prove unsustainable. In an industry where image often trumps reality, the Franco-Rogen saga reminds us that behind the characters, behind the laughter, behind the carefully constructed public personas, real decisions have real consequences. And sometimes those consequences include losing the creative partnership that defined your career and the friend you thought would always have your back.